Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, he's long been a controversial figure in the history of the Hillsborough Stadium disaster. Now, Norman Bettison, then a Chief Inspector in South Yorkshire Police and later to become Chief Constable of Merseyside and West Yorkshire, has published a book giving his side of the story. Mr Bettison is under investigation by the Independent Police Complaints Commission and could even face charges over his alleged involvement in a cover-up of police failings. So the move has angered the families of those who died in the crush. Our Chief Correspondent Alex Thompson reports from Liverpool.
Sir Norman Bettison is trying, he says, to clear his name as a scapegoat for Hillsborough, a word he uses in his book. In Liverpool, survivors of the Hillsborough disaster and the families of the 96 who died are appalled.
I think it's his ego. He's a narcissist. It's all about him.
Lifelong Everton fan Steve Kelly lost his brother Michael at Hillsborough, a Liverpool supporter.
This book is his way of, again in my opinion, satisfying his ego that he was clear of everything. He wasn't. There's a cloud hanging over Norman Bettison, and the cloud is Hillsborough, and he's trying to eradicate it by giving a concocted story of I'm innocent, Gov.
That Hillsborough cloud certainly exists for Bettison. He's a suspect interviewed under caution by the police watchdog. Their papers will go to the Crown Prosecution Service before Christmas.
I'd like, amongst other people, I'd like the Crown Prosecution Service to also have available my narrative. And that hasn't necessarily been made available because it doesn't fit with some of the more popular ones. What I'm inviting people to do is, if they're going to denounce me, and if they're going to strip me and flail me and make me a monster, what I'd like people to do is be clear and be specific about what it is that they think I've done.
In his interview and in his book, he vehemently denies there was any conspiracy or cover-up as the police prepared their case for this man, Lord Justice Taylor. His Hillsborough inquiry blamed the police for the disaster. This document came to light in Norman Bettison's handwriting. It's asking for a police statement to be altered. But he insists this was not a cover-up. The central purpose of his book is to show, as he sees it, there was no police cover-up after the Hillsborough disaster. And yet, when we repeatedly asked him how it could be that hundreds of statements were doctored without there being a conspiracy, he declined to answer.
The process was a lawyer-led process in which police officers were used to get the officer to transpose an aide-memoire into a statement. Now,
you can dress up the language.
I'm not dressing anything up.
Well, respect, I think you are. The statements got changed. That is a matter of fact which you have difficulty accepting.
What I can say is this.
Well, you do have difficulty accepting.
No, I don't at all. They were changed.
Right, thank you. Now, my question is this. Given you accept they were changed, that had to be done in an organised fashion between the police and their lawyers.
No, my account was...
It wasn't a statement, Fairies. It happened.
My account was changed. Let me tell you about my account.
No, I'm asking you about 116 accounts.
No, well, let me tell you this. That's still subject of the full and forensic investigation by the IPCC. The only thing that I can tell you...
You have difficulty addressing this, don't you?
No, the only thing I can tell you with any certainty is I wasn't involved, and what I saw, what I witnessed, wasn't a clandestine plot to corrupt the evidence that went to the Taylor inquiry.
Outside his beloved Anfield, Richie Greaves, a survivor of the Hillsborough crush. He's already read the book carefully.
He doesn't mention the blood alcohol levels that were taken from survivors as they lay injured in the hospital beds. So basically anything that points the finger at South Yorkshire Police or embarrasses them in any way, or him in any way, is not mentioned in the book.
Mr Bettison's caused further anger on Merseyside, though, because his book criticises the universally praised Hillsborough Independent panel for not being independent. Moreover, if only to dismiss them, he again raises the lies that Liverpool fans arrived drunk and late and contributed to the disaster. And that seems bizarre for a man who claims...
In the book, I accept, and I do it in the preface, and I repeat it throughout, I accept that the Lord Justice Taylor got it right 27 years ago. The main cause of the disaster was a failure of police control.
This afternoon, Waterstones told us they will not stock this book. They said every buying decision we make is based on the quality of the book. Alex Thompson, Channel 4 News, Liverpool.
Now, a senior figure in the police response to the Hillsborough disaster has told Sky News they did not cover up anything in the aftermath of the tragedy. Sir Norman Bettison was accused by an MP of running a propaganda unit to blame fans. Well, he has written a book about his experiences and he spoke to Sky News earlier today. Let's cross live to Liverpool and Sheila Coleman of the Hillsborough Justice Campaign. Good to talk to you, Sheila. What's your reaction to the publication of Sir Norman's book?
Well, it makes me angry and it makes us all angry because the timing of it is appalling. The title of it, Hillsborough Untold. Norman Bettison has had ample opportunity to tell his versions of the truth of Hillsborough, and we don't believe that he has ever done that. His public persona is so important to him. But my concern and my anger is around the issue of this focusing on Norman Bettison and diverting attention away from the wider issues. Let's not forget that there has still been no accountability following on from the unlawful killing verdict. We are still awaiting a DPP decision on whether criminal prosecutions will arise. Norman Bettison, South Yorkshire Police are still under investigation. The timing of this book is appalling. What concerns me greatly is the attention is on Bettison and not on South Yorkshire Police. I am inclined to see this as not Norman Bettison as some form of maverick cop, as to a wider issue of controlling the agenda of Hillsborough and the history of Hillsborough, and we won't allow that to happen. It's very expedient that the emphasis is on Norman Bettison and not on South Yorkshire Police, given the recent decision around the Orgreave campaign and even yesterday's acquittal of the Rotherham 12, again involving South Yorkshire Police. I see this as part of a wider agenda, and I do think that this book needs to be consigned to the dustbin of £1 books in remainder shops, and then hopefully people will use it to fuel the flames.
Indeed, and I understand your concern about the timing, but he says he's been made a scapegoat. He has every right to speak out and defend himself, and in his mind, clear his name, doesn't he?
I would defend anyone's right to free speech and also to defend their rights. Unfortunately, those rights weren't afforded either to the dead of Hillsborough and Hillsborough families and survivors for a long time. Has this gone dead now?
No, we can hear you, Sheila.
Hello?
Hello, Sheila, we can hear you.
Okay.
Do continue.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. My concern is the timing of this book and also how he uses the book to conflate issues which you would tend to agree with him on, of law and of fact, but then within that refer to fans. And I do think, again, this book is a diversion, and I do think he has had ample opportunity over many years to tell the truth. Let's not forget, this man policed us here on Merseyside for many years, and he knew the strength of feeling. So Norman Bettison has released this book, I think, in agreement with other people, and I think it's appalling given that there has never been any accountability yet. It's not being sold in Liverpool, and we will not. But this takes our time up. But every time Norman Bettison or someone else comes out to rewrite the history of Hillsborough, we will be there to tell the truth and to establish the truth for the annals of history.
He's giving the money to charity, isn't he, apparently, the proceeds. Does that not assuage your anger any?
Yes. No, it doesn't assuage my anger at all. I would rather people didn't write the book. I know he's also dedicates the book to his grandchildren and says it so they can know when they Google his name that they don't get this villain that he thinks he's being made out to be. Well, let me tell you, Norman Bettison is no victim. The victims are the 96 and also the survivors, many of whom have committed suicide and still suffer trauma because of the cover-up and conspiracy of Hillsborough, of which it is argued Norman Bettison was an integral part. So the money going to charity, you know what, I would say to those people, we'll give you the money, we'll go out and collect money for you. Don't take dirty money, because that's what this will be.
OK, Sheila Colburn from the Hillsborough Justice Campaign, thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you.
Let's talk more now about Hillsborough and the officer who oversaw South Yorkshire Police's highly controversial response to the tragedy. He's denied covering anything up. Sir Norman Bettison was accused by Labour MP Maria Eagle of running an effort to blame fans for the disaster. Well, Sir Norman told us earlier that he's been the victim of a smear campaign.
For 4 years since Maria Eagle made the statement under parliamentary privilege that I was responsible for orchestrating a black propaganda campaign, there's been a lot written about me, there's been a lot said about me, which fits for me in the category of either supposition, smear, or just plain wrong facts. The Hillsborough Independent Panel Report, and here's another myth, the Hillsborough Independent Panel Report, in all its 395 pages, has not accused me of any wrongdoing whatsoever.
Well, you did say after that report that the fans had made the police's job much harder than it needed to be.
And what's the next line? Have you got the next line there? The next line is, but they were in no way to blame for the disaster that occurred.
Yeah, but you can't have the two. I mean, how did they make the police's job harder?
Right, the reason...
I mean, other than being injured. Do you accept that basically the police covered up the mistakes they made and blamed the fans, and that has resulted in decades of agony for the families?
No, the police did not cover up anything that I witnessed.
Or misrepresent anything?
I have not witnessed, in the work that I've been doing, misrepresentation or jiggery-pokery.
And we can speak to Maria Eagle now. Good afternoon to you, Maria Eagle. We'll talk a little bit in a little bit more detail in just a moment about Sir Norman Bettison's comments about you. But I just want to ask you firstly what you make of his decision to write the book in the first place.
Well, I think it's ill-judged. I think it's extremely badly timed. I've read the book. I think it's a partial and self-serving account. We're speaking just at the time, within 6 weeks of when the Independent Police Complaints Commission are due to give recommendations to the Crown Prosecution Service about whether there ought to be any criminal charges arising out of Hillsborough on the day, the aftermath, including the cover-up. And I don't think that now is the best time for him to have produced his book.
I mean, you've read the book. The Independent Police Complaints Commission have also been handed a copy. They haven't had any comment to make on it, have they? I mean, you've expressed your concerns about the timing, but he says he's written the book because you were able to stand up in Parliament back in 2012 and make accusations about him. He says after that there was a smear campaign, that he was vilified, and that this is his chance for him to have his say, to set the record straight, as he puts it.
Well, as I say, I think it's ill-timed because the IPCC and the Crown Prosecution Service are in the process of making decisions about whether or not there ought to be any criminal charges. And if there are subsequently criminal trials, then musings at this stage may end up prejudicing any proceedings, and that would not be in the interest of justice. That's why I say it's ill-timed. The fact is that I stand by everything that I have ever said, both inside the House of Commons and outside the House of Commons, about Hillsborough, about its aftermath and about the cover-up. And so there's no question about that. Of course he has a right to produce his account, but I would question the timing of it more than anything.
Aside from the timing then, do you think it's right that he should be allowed to have his say? I mean, he's denied being part of any conspiracy to blame fans or change statements in the aftermath of the disaster, hasn't he? And he did that strongly on Sky News earlier on today. But he's used the words, he's become a lightning conductor for public anger. He says he's been unfairly scapegoated in Parliament and in the media, on social media as well. He describes himself as being a whipping boy. Is it not right that he should have his say?
Well, of course, we live in a free country. I question the timing. It's a particularly sensitive time for him to be doing this, and so I question that. But, you know, he calls his book Hillsborough Untold. There's nothing new or untold in the book. He's been saying these things for very many years. And I just think now is not the time when the IPCC and the Crown Prosecution Service are due to make decisions about whether there should be any criminal trials arising out of the findings of unlawful killing in the inquests which ended recently. After 27 years, I might say, of fighting by the families to get the original inquest verdict of accidental death overturned.
And speaking of the families, how have they responded to the publication of this book?
Well, it's very upsetting for them constantly to have the same old story told, which we see the narrative that he presents in this book. But you know, they're resilient people. They've had to be. But needless to say, the ones that I've heard from are not particularly happy about this self-serving and self-centred account. He always likes to put himself right in the middle of any Hillsborough stories. He seems to have done it again.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to be suggesting that the Hillsborough families have been campaigning for truth for many, many years now, and this is just another part of that truth.
Well, it's as I say, the story that he's perpetrated is a very long-standing and an old one from many years ago, and one has to ask oneself why the original inquests came to the verdicts that they did of accidental death, why the fans have been blamed for so many years following those inquest verdicts, and why it's taken 27 years for the families to establish both the truth and to get some measure of justice for what happened to their loved ones, what happened also to the survivors, and the way in which the city of Liverpool and Merseyside has been traduced in the intervening years as a result of the consequences of the way in which South Yorkshire Police decided to deal with this disaster.
Yeah, I mean, it is an incredibly sensitive issue. Sir Norman Bettison himself admits that. He says no one's going to write it for me. He's dedicated this book to his grandchildren because he doesn't want them to only see the negatives about him. He suggests that this is about putting his version of events on record. And he says he's become the symbol of something that's pointed out from the past, something very negative, with a little help from politicians. I wonder what you make of his claim that it's supposition, smear, or plain wrong facts.
Well, look, I don't agree with any of what he says about that, but of course now is not the time for me to defend myself against any charges he might make. I don't feel the need to do so. I stand by every word I've ever said about Hillsborough, both inside and outside the House of Commons. It's not something I've ever done lightly. I've always made sure that I've informed myself before I've said anything about this disaster, its aftermath and its impact on the families, many of whom are my constituents.
OK, Maria Eagle, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this afternoon.
Thank you.
I've been getting away with it all my